My name is Yolanda Carter. I'm 31 years old. And this is the story of how my own family tried to erase me from existence, only to end up walking blindly into the very house I built with everything they said I lacked. It started on a quiet Thursday morning. The sea was calm. A breeze from the Atlantic licked the edges of the rosemary bush outside my studio window, and I was sipping the last of my coffee when the email came in. The subject line read, Avalon Properties, guest confirmation for June 17th to 24th, Carter family booking. At first, I thought it was a mistake. My hands hovered over the trackpad, rereading it, breath lodged somewhere between shock and irony. The Carter family, my family, had unknowingly rented my beach house for their big reunion. I laughed. A sharp, incredulous sound that echoed around my studio. They had no idea. They didn't know I was the owner now. They thought they were booking some anonymous luxury villa in Rhode Island. But that house? That house was mine. They were coming here. The same people who hadn't spoken my name in almost a decade. The same family that had turned their backs on me when I chose to live differently. To be an artist instead of a commodity. To be human instead of perfect. And now, fate, or something crueler and funnier, had brought them straight to my doorstep. No invitation. No apology. Just entitlement on arrival. I didn't cancel the booking. Instead, I watched. Saturday arrived. I monitored the exterior security camera feeds from my studio tucked behind the property, a former guest house I had converted into a workspace and small apartment. It had its own entrance. Its own rhythm. Its own silence. They arrived in 3 cars. My mother, Gloria, stepped out first, still elegant, still ice-wrapped in satin. Her heels crunched softly on the gravel driveway. My father, Raymond, followed, phone already to his ear like the world owed him time. James, my older brother, appeared next with his overly polished family, his 2 kids bouncing excitedly on the walkway. Then Amanda, my younger sister, dragging a designer suitcase and holding her infant like an accessory. No one said my name. Not once. But they did admire the landscaping. They did marvel at the open-concept kitchen, the ocean view, the hand-picked furniture. I saw them in the foyer, pausing at the photograph of a lone seagull in flight, taken from the very edge of the cliffs. They saw the framed print, but didn't recognize the signature etched small in the corner, YC. Yolanda Carter. Their erasure hadn't worked. I was right here. Watching. The real twist came the next morning. I had left 5 black and white photographs on the coffee table, artfully framed, discreetly placed. Not labeled. Just there. One was of my mother's hands twisting her wedding ring, a shot I took in secret when I was 19 and terrified of telling her I didn't want to go into finance. Another was James, sitting on a dock, looking out at nothing. Amanda, brushing my hair when I was 8. My father reading the newspaper in his old sun chair. And the 5th, a photo of me, holding a camera, a sliver of my reflection in the lens. It took them seconds to notice. My mother's smile faltered. She picked up the frame with trembling fingers and stared like it might burn her. My father stood completely still, eyes squinting as if seeing too clearly was dangerous. Amanda frowned, a flicker of recognition in her eyes. But no one said it. No one said my name. Instead, Gloria told the housekeeper to remove them. They don't match the decor. That was when I knew. I wasn't just forgotten. I was deliberately buried. 10 years earlier, I had graduated with honors. Valedictorian. Double major in business and visual arts. I was the kind of daughter they paraded until I wasn't. Because the moment I told them I'd turned down an offer at my uncle's firm to pursue photography, everything fell apart. You're throwing it all away, my father had spat. You'll embarrass us, my mother whispered, her voice tight as a garrote. Art is for people with trust funds or nothing to lose. I had both, barely. And still, I walked. They cut me off financially, socially, and emotionally. Invitations stopped. My photos disappeared from the walls. When people asked about me, they said I was traveling, taking time for herself. Eventually, they stopped saying anything at all. At family events, I was the silence no one spoke over. So I made a life of my own. In shadows. In light. Through the lens. I worked as an assistant for wedding photographers, then in luxury real estate shoots, slowly climbing, building a name behind the camera. One client led to another. My style, clean, haunting, quietly intimate, started to gain attention. Then came Elise Barrington. An eccentric, retired novelist who had seen my photo essay published in a local magazine. She reached out, asked me to document her home before she moved into hospice care. That home was the beach house. After our final session, she handed me a key. When I go, she said, eyes cloudy with truth, this place will be yours. Use it. Heal in it. A year later, the deed was in my name. And now, here we were. 10 years erased. One house resurrected. And a reunion that would remember me, whether they wanted to or not. I didn't make an announcement. I didn't plan a dramatic entrance. But the morning of the second day, I walked through the back patio door with my camera in hand, dressed simply, no makeup, just me. The wooden floor creaked beneath my feet. A sound no one had heard in years. Heads turned. Glasses stopped mid-air. Time cracked. My mother's Dior clutch fell from her lap. Raymond stared like he'd seen a ghost. Amanda's lips parted, but no words came. James stood up fast, his chair scraping loudly behind him. A little girl stepped forward, Emma, James' daughter. Her eyes were wide, soft curls bouncing as she approached. Who are you? She asked quietly. Why has no one ever mentioned you before? My heart twisted. But I smiled. The kind of smile I wore in high-profile client meetings. Poised. Controlled. I'm Yolanda, I said gently. I used to be part of this family. Silence. Thick. Unforgiving. Then Gloria rose, clutching her wine glass with fingers tight as stone. Why are you here? I met her eyes. You're standing in my house, I said calmly. Maybe you should answer that question. The silence after my words wasn't just awkward. It was warlike. You could feel it crawling into the skin of everyone seated around the patio table. Even the seagulls circling overhead seemed to have flown off. My father spoke next, voice flat, as though he was trying to regain control of a conversation no one had started. What do you mean your house? You booked it through Avalon Properties, didn't you? I asked, my voice level, betraying none of the storm building inside me. James gave a subtle nod. I already knew the answer. Of course they had. They probably assumed Avalon owned it outright, or that it was managed by some distant corporate firm. I tilted my head slightly and smiled, the kind of smile I used when clients tried to shortchange my worth. I'm the legal owner. Has been in my name for 5 years now. Gloria sat down hard, clutching the armrest like she suddenly felt the weight of her diamonds. How, she choked. How is that possible? You'd be amazed what one can accomplish, I said, walking slowly toward the edge of the deck. When she's cut off. Discarded. Erased. I let the moment hang, the weight of the word erased turning heads. Distant cousins, family friends, even the gardener, no one spoke. They just watched. Gloria looked around helplessly, as though someone else might jump in, smooth it over. No one did. You didn't buy this, my father muttered. You couldn't have. I turned to face him, raising my chin. What's that supposed to mean, Raymond? That because I didn't take your money, I wasn't capable of building something of my own? He blinked. I hadn't called him Dad. Not in 10 years. Not since he walked out of that restaurant during my graduation dinner like I was just an error on a spreadsheet. A small voice interrupted the tension. "Miss Yolanda?" It was Emma again. She held up a pale blue bracelet. Glittered silver letters spelled out Miss Y. Her hands were trembling slightly. "I found this in the toy box inside," she said. "Is it yours?" My heart caught in my throat. I'd given her that bracelet for her 3rd birthday. Right before everything fell apart. Back then, I was still the aunt who brought cameras and coloring books, who made silly faces and knew every Disney princess. I crouched to meet her eyes. "Yes, baby," I said, gently taking it from her. "It was a gift. From me. For you." She tilted her head. "Why didn't they ever tell me about you?" I smiled again, tighter this time. "Some stories get buried." That was enough. I stood, brushing off my dress, and addressed the table. "I won't stop you from staying. You paid for the week, after all. Just know your guests in a home you once told me I'd never be good enough to own." Then I walked away. Back to the guest house, my sanctuary. Every step felt like tearing open a wound and filling it with salt water. But I didn't look back. Not once. Because the moment I did, I'd risk slipping back into that old pattern, chasing their approval like it was air. I spent the rest of the day editing photos in silence. But I couldn't focus. The noise of their voices, the echo of that little girl's innocent question, it all stuck to me like static. I remembered the day I left. Boxes packed. Nothing but a cracked suitcase, my camera, and a notebook filled with dreams I wasn't allowed to speak aloud. I'd walked out of that Beverly Hills house, past the polished marble floor, the portrait of the Carter family hanging in the entryway, where I was already missing. No goodbye. No apology. Just a locked gate behind me. It wasn't dramatic. Just final. That night, I opened an old drawer in the studio and pulled out my grandmother's last letter to me. Her handwriting was shaky but still elegant. "If they ever try to erase you, baby, remember, you were here. You existed. And that's enough. Let your life be proof. And take your pictures, not just with light, but with truth." She was the only one who ever said I had the eye. And she was right. Because now the camera was mine. And this story? This time, I got to tell it. The next morning, I returned to the house. Not to talk, not to argue, but to shoot. I told the staff I was conducting a brand feature for the villa's marketing material, and the family. They were welcome to enjoy the week. Just ignore me. Pretend I was never here, something they were quite good at anyway. They nodded. Tense, unsure, but unable to object. By noon, I was walking barefoot on the sand, lens raised, capturing the shoreline, the soft echo of children's laughter in the distance. Emma was playing with Zoe, Amanda's oldest. The girls had no idea they were healing something with every step. Then I turned, raised the camera to the villa, and took one shot that would define everything. The Carter family, gathered on a deck they didn't know I built, beneath a roof they never thought I'd afford, sipping wine they thought they were entitled to. Click. A photo frozen in time. Unaware the woman they erased was now framing them through her own lens. Later that evening, Angela, my property manager, came by with a document to sign for a future booking. As she handed it over, she raised an eyebrow. "They figured it out yet?" I shook my head. "Some of them know. Some of them pretend not to." Angela smirked. "They're gonna crack." I didn't say anything. But inside, I knew she was right. The mask never stays on forever. Especially when you're sitting inside the house built by your discarded daughter. By midweek, the tension was undeniable. Amanda avoided eye contact. James stayed quiet. And my mother? She looked like a porcelain doll one hairline away from a shatter. It all came to a head on Thursday night. A thunderstorm rolled in fast, typical New England fury. The power flickered. The ocean roared just beyond the cliffs. And in the dim candlelight of the dining room, my father rose suddenly and looked me square in the face. "You really own this place?" he asked. His voice was raw, unpolished. "I do," I replied simply. "How?" That one word held so much disbelief. Like he couldn't fathom a world where I existed without him as architect. I could have listed the jobs I worked. The nights I didn't sleep. The ramen dinners, the burned fingers, the weddings I shot in freezing rain. But instead, I answered with something truer. "Because I stopped needing your permission to exist." He sat down hard. And for the first time, I saw it in his eyes, not shame, not guilt, but fear. Fear that the version of me they discarded had become something powerful. Something untouchable. Something real. The storm that night wasn't just outside, it was in the walls. In the tension at the dinner table. In the flicker of candlelight bouncing off awkward glances and untouched glasses of wine. Every clink of a fork against porcelain was a sharp reminder, I wasn't supposed to be here. Not in their version of this story. But I was. And I wasn't leaving. After my father sat down, no one spoke for a long time. I could hear the rain slapping the windows, the wind tugging at the patio umbrellas. A low thunder rumbled in the distance, and yet, somehow, it was quieter than the silence between us. James cleared his throat and shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "So, you really live here now?" "I do," I replied, calm as ever. Amanda stared into her glass like it might swallow her. My mother picked at the rim of her plate with a butter knife, face unreadable. "I'm surprised you didn't say anything," James added, a little more hesitantly. "All this time. You could've." "What?" I cut in gently. "Called a family meeting? Held a press conference? Maybe sent out a group email letting everyone know the exiled daughter has made a modest comeback?" James looked away. I sighed, not because I was angry, at least, not anymore, but because I finally realized how little I expected from them now. And maybe that was the worst part of growing up. Not just learning to live without people, but learning you never really had them. Later that night, I found myself standing in the hallway just outside the guest bedroom. I didn't know why I was there, just that something pulled me, like gravity, or memory. That's when I heard Amanda's voice. Soft, muffled, breaking. "I can't do this anymore, James. I can't keep pretending he's not cheating on me. That everything's fine. That I'm fine." My breath caught. "I've known for 3 years," she continued. 3. And Mom knows too. She told me to keep my mouth shut. Said if I divorced Tom, the entire family image would fall apart. Said Carter women don't leave, we endure. I backed away quietly before they noticed I was there. I didn't want to hear more. Not because I didn't care, but because for the first time, I saw Amanda differently. Not the cold, perfect sister who used to roll her eyes when I brought up photography, but a woman stuck in a life she never chose. Trapped behind the same expectations that once crushed me. The next morning, the storm had passed. Sunlight poured across the hardwood floor like nothing had happened. I brewed coffee in the guest house, took a walk along the shoreline, then returned to the villa with my camera slung around my neck. I wasn't working. I just needed to see them in the light. The kids were building sandcastles near the water. Amanda was on a deck chair, sunglasses hiding her swollen eyes. James was helping Emma collect shells. And Gloria? She was in the kitchen. Alone. Hands pressed against the countertop, staring at a glass of untouched water. She looked smaller in the daylight. "I remember when you stopped calling me Mom," she said without turning around. I leaned against the doorframe. "You stopped acting like one." She flinched. "I was scared," she whispered. "When you walked away." Not just because you left, but because I knew I couldn't control what happened to you anymore. I stepped into the kitchen. My hands were shaking, but my voice stayed steady. I didn't walk away because I wanted to hurt you. I left because staying would have killed who I was becoming. She looked at me then, really looked. And I saw it. Regret. Not the performative kind. But something raw, buried deep beneath decades of denial. You know, she said slowly, I still have the first picture you ever took. That Polaroid of your grandmother knitting by the window. I kept it in a drawer. I couldn't look at it. But I couldn't throw it away either. That stopped me cold. She reached into her bag and pulled it out. The corners were worn, the colors faded. But it was mine. I stared at it, emotions rising in my chest like a flood. She used to say you had the eyes of a storyteller, Gloria said, voice trembling. I didn't understand what she meant. But now, maybe I do. She placed the photo on the counter between us and turned to leave. Before she reached the door, I said softly, I'm hosting Thanksgiving here this year. She paused. I wasn't going to invite you, I added. But I'm thinking about it. She didn't respond. Just nodded once. Then disappeared down the hall. That afternoon, James came to my studio. Alone. He looked around at the framed shots on the walls, editorial spreads, real estate portfolios, wedding moments suspended in time. This is impressive, he said finally. Thanks. You really did it. Yeah. He sat down across from me. You know they told everyone you had a breakdown? I figured. They said you were unstable, needed treatment, vanished. They said you weren't strong enough for the world. And you? I asked. Did you believe it? At first, he admitted. But after a while, I knew better. I just didn't know how to say it. Now you do. We sat in silence for a while. Then he reached into his pocket and placed something on my desk. A small, folded piece of paper. Mom wrote this after you left, he said. I found it in her jewelry box a few years ago. I think it was meant for you. I unfolded it. The handwriting was unmistakably hers. Yolanda. If you ever come back, I want you to know that I never stopped loving you. I just didn't know how to love you without breaking everything I thought was right. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe you were the only one who was ever brave enough to be honest. Mom. I stared at the letter for a long time. Then I placed it inside an empty frame on the shelf. No title. No caption. Just truth. Later that evening, Amanda showed up at the studio. No robe. No makeup. Just a hoodie and jeans. Do you hate me? She asked bluntly. No, I said. I just stopped needing your approval. She sat down. I wish I had done what you did. You still can. Amanda laughed bitterly. It's not that easy. I never said it was. We talked for hours. Not as sisters. As women. As survivors of the same suffocating expectations. She cried. I didn't. But for the first time in years, we saw each other, not through old roles, but through rawness. She didn't ask for forgiveness. I didn't offer it. We just sat together in the quiet. And maybe that was the beginning. By Friday morning, something had shifted in the house. The laughter had returned, but it was quieter. The clinking of glasses was softer. Conversations were no longer loud declarations about promotions or charity galas. It was as if the whole family had been placed under a new filter, a subtler lens, one that captured the cracks they'd always tried to blur out. I stayed in the background, observing like I always had. Only now, they noticed me. James brought me coffee. Amanda asked about my upcoming shoots. Even Gloria, who used to sweep into rooms with cold perfume and disapproval, now paused when I spoke, listening. Not interrupting. Listening. But the real shift came when Raymond, my father, entered my studio. It was unexpected. He hadn't knocked. Just opened the door and stood there like a man entering a cathedral he'd abandoned decades ago. I was editing photos at the time, my back to the door. I turned, startled, and he looked just as shocked to see me startled. As if he'd forgotten I was human. "I didn't come to fight," he said. "Good," I replied, not unkindly. "Because I'm tired of battles." He nodded and walked slowly around the room, stopping at one of my favorite prints, a bride dancing barefoot in a field at dusk, the wind tugging at her veil like a spirit trying to pull her back. "This is beautiful," he said quietly. "Thank you." "I've seen your name," he admitted. "In magazines. On gallery lists. I just never connected it. Or maybe I didn't want to." "You were the one who taught me how to use light meters," I said softly. He looked at me then, eyes wide with realization. "You remember that?" I nodded. "You bought that old Nikon when I was 10. Said every Carter should know how to frame a shot. I don't think you expected me to run with it." "No," he said. "I didn't." He sat down heavily on the edge of the leather bench near the window. The ocean view stretched behind him, a perfect backdrop for the scene we never had. "I was angry," he said. "Back then. Not because you left, but because I thought you were throwing away the legacy." "You mean the business?" "No," he said, shaking his head. "The control." I blinked. Raymond Carter was many things, stern, methodical, ruthlessly successful. But self-aware? Vulnerable? Never. "I didn't know how to love a child who didn't obey," he admitted, staring at his hands. "I built my life on order. Discipline. Structure. But you were chaos. Beautiful, maddening chaos." I laughed under my breath. "Thanks." He smiled faintly. "You terrify me, Yolanda." I stared at him. "Why?" "Because you're everything I couldn't be." He stood and walked to the shelf where I kept a stack of unfinished prints. Slowly, he picked up a wrapped frame. "May I?" I nodded. He unwrapped the canvas, revealing a portrait I had taken years ago, a quiet moment of my grandmother, seated in her garden, sunlight casting lace patterns through her wide-brimmed hat. Her face soft and knowing, like she could see everything even with her eyes closed. Raymond swallowed. "She told me once that you see what people hide. Not just in photos. In life." "She was the only one who ever encouraged it," I said. "I know," he replied. We stood in silence, both staring at the woman we had loved in such different ways. Then he looked at me and said the thing I never expected to hear from him. "I want to commission you." I blinked. "What?" "For a campaign. Carter Group is rebranding. We've hired firms, consultants, media strategists. But none of them have your eye." I shook my head. "You want the daughter you disowned to shoot the face of your empire?" He didn't flinch. "I want the artist who built her own." I crossed my arms, not out of defiance but grounding. There would be terms. Creative control. Full credit. No backroom edits. And everything goes through my team. "Agreed," he said instantly. "Send your terms to legal. We'll sign whatever's needed." Just like that, it was happening. A Carter child, yes, but not as a pawn. As a partner. That night, after dinner, Gloria surprised me again. She walked into the studio holding a box wrapped in linen. "I thought you should have this," she said. I opened it. Inside were dozens of old family photos. Some with me. Some without. But there I was aged 4, hugging Amanda. Aged 7, asleep on James' shoulder. Aged 15, holding a camera bigger than my head. All the versions of me they had tried to forget. I didn't throw them away, she said. I just couldn't look. Tears sprang to my eyes. I didn't want them to, but they came anyway. For all the years I believed I'd been erased. Why now? I asked. She hesitated. Because I saw your photo of Emma on the beach. The one you printed and left in the living room. You recognized her? No, she whispered. I recognized you. We didn't hug. That wasn't us. But she placed her hand on my shoulder. The way she hadn't in over a decade. That small touch carried more weight than 1,000 apologies. The next morning, the family began to leave. James was the first. He hugged me tightly and promised to call. Amanda left next, with her children but without Tom. She didn't say much, but her eyes told the story. She was done pretending. Gloria and Raymond were last. They lingered in the foyer. Raymond shook my hand like I was a CEO. Gloria kissed my cheek. Then they walked out into the sunlight, arm in arm, quiet, unsure, but changed. I stood in the doorway, alone again. But not empty. Not erased. Later that day, I walked the beach with Zoe, James' daughter, and handed her my first Canon camera. For you, I said. Use it only when you want to remember something forever. She grinned. What if I forget how to use it? I smiled. Then I'll show you. And that was how it began again, not with reconciliation, but with continuity. A story not rewritten, but reframed. 3 weeks later, I stepped into the glass-walled lobby of the Carter Group's new headquarters in downtown Providence, Rhode Island, a structure my father had proudly referred to in Forbes as the heart of our new legacy. Now, the daughter they disowned was here to capture it. The building was sleek, cold, impersonal. All steel bones and white marble skin. Designed to impress, not invite. I walked in wearing black jeans, a fitted blazer, camera strapped across my chest, and confidence like armor. My team followed, Lena, my lighting tech, and Raj and Marcus, my post-production editors. None of them knew the full backstory. I didn't need them to. All they needed to know was that this wasn't just a shoot. It was a reckoning. The receptionist didn't recognize me, but the moment she read my badge in the file, her expression changed. A quick blink, then that polite professional voice. Ah, Miss Carter, sorry, Yolanda. You're expected on the top floor. Mr. Carter said to bring you up personally. Of course he did. We rode the elevator in silence. My fingers drummed against my thigh, my heartbeat calm, methodical. No panic. No second guessing. I had worked too hard to be rattled now. When the doors opened on the 7th floor, Raymond was waiting, dressed like always, sharp suit, navy tie, shoes you could see your reflection in. He was standing in front of a massive conference room window, arms crossed behind his back, the city skyline gleaming behind him like a throne room backdrop. You're early, he said. I always am, I replied. Time is expensive. He smiled faintly, just a flicker, but it was the first genuine thing I'd seen from him in years. He extended his hand. Welcome to the heart of the Carter brand. I didn't take his hand. Instead, I lifted my camera. Let's get to work. We spent the first day shooting standard compositions, boardroom setups, brand logo placements, CEO profile shots. I gave firm direction, made quick adjustments, took dozens of stills, and spoke with the same authority I gave clients at Vogue or Harper's. Raymond tried once to suggest a pose. I held up my hand. You hired my team. Let me do what you paid me to do. He never interrupted again. But I noticed something, each time I raised the lens, he flinched. Not visibly. Just a slight tension around the eyes. As if being seen by me, truly seen, was something he didn't know how to endure. We wrapped day one with a soft portrait in his office. I brought in warm lighting, subtle contrast, lowered the blinds behind him. At the end, I reached into my bag and pulled out a prop. An empty white frame. I placed it on his desk. He looked at it, puzzled. "No photo?" he asked. "Not yet," I said. Still deciding what deserves to go in it. He didn't argue. Day 2 was the executive team. Amanda's husband, Tom, walked in late, wearing smugness like cologne. He hadn't seen me yet. "Where's the photographer?" he barked, looking around. I stood. "Right here." He froze. His eyes narrowed slightly, but he recovered quickly. Well. Look who clawed her way back to relevance." I smiled. "Nice to see you, Tom. Just a reminder, this shoot's being documented for external press. Try not to blink during the flash." His grin faltered. I adjusted the lighting, then gestured toward the backdrop. "Chin up. Confidence. Now tilt your head slightly, there, perfect. Like you're hiding a secret." Tom stiffened. "What are you implying?" I snapped the photo. "Nothing. Just trying to capture your essence." Later that evening, as we reviewed shots, Amanda dropped by the studio suite they had arranged for me. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For not saying anything. About Tom. About everything." I looked up from the screen. "It's not my story to tell." She nodded. Then reached into her bag and pulled out a photo, one of her holding her son, face turned away from the camera, smile soft and real. "I want you to frame this," she said. "For my new place. I'm leaving him." I set the laptop aside and stood. "You sure?" "I am," she said, voice steady. "You reminded me who I was before I became an ornament." I hugged her. Not as a symbol. Just as a sister. By the end of the week, we had everything we needed: shots of the leadership team, behind-the-scenes moments, product placements, candid captures of the company in motion. My team worked like clockwork, editing each night, turning images that were once sterile into frames filled with story. Then, the final session. Gloria had agreed to pose with Raymond in a formal legacy portrait, something for the Carter Group's 50-year anniversary marketing material. But she had one condition. "I want Yolanda to choose the location." We ended up in the rooftop garden. It was early evening. The golden hour was starting. Light fell perfectly between the tall grasses and stone benches. Raymond adjusted his cuffs. Gloria smoothed her hair. I raised the camera. "Closer," I said. They stepped toward each other. "Look ahead," I instructed. "Now turn slightly, shoulders relaxed. Not too posed. Not too perfect." They followed. I framed them exactly how I wanted. Not as a couple dominating an empire, but as two people who once believed control was the same thing as love. I clicked the shutter. And for the first time since I was a child, I felt like they were looking at me, not the future version they wanted, not the obedient daughter they created in their minds, but me. After the session, Raymond approached as I packed up. "I wanted to tell you something," he said, carefully. I nodded, letting him speak. "I've been going to the gallery where your work is shown. Quietly. Every few months. I saw the Estranged series before I knew it was yours." I paused. "And?" "It made me uncomfortable." I smiled. "Good." He chuckled softly. "But it made me think. Which is harder?" We stood side by side, watching the sun dip lower behind the city skyline. Then he said something that lodged itself deep inside me. "You didn't just survive without us. You evolved beyond us." I said nothing. Because there was nothing left to prove. Before I left the building, I returned to his office and placed the white frame on his desk. "Inside it now?" A printed quote. You may have erased me from the picture, but I kept the negatives. He'd see it Monday morning. Thanksgiving morning arrived with the kind of crisp blue sky that only coastal November days can manage, clean, cool, and wide open. The kind of sky that feels like it's daring you to start over. I stood barefoot on the porch of the villa I once turned into a fortress. Today, it would become something else. Something softer. Warmer. Not a place to hide. But a space to host. My hands trembled slightly as I arranged the final touches. Not from nerves, but from meaning. Everything on that table had intention: sand-colored linens, crystal wine glasses borrowed from the studio, a cedar and cinnamon candle flickering between platters of roasted turkey, cranberry compote, and herbed potatoes. I'd worked with a local chef, not to impress, but to nourish. Because today wasn't about image, it was about reclamation. I sent out the invitations weeks earlier. Some to friends who became family. Some to colleagues who stayed up late with me editing under deadlines. And, yes, one to each member of the Carter family. I didn't expect everyone to show up. But they came. Zoe, James' youngest, arrived first, her hair in a side ponytail, gripping the Canon camera I gave her over the summer. I came early to catch the golden hour, she said, eyes gleaming. I smiled. What moment are you hoping to capture? I don't know yet, she said. But I'll let the camera find it. I saw myself in her. Or maybe I saw who I could have been, had I not been forced to survive. James and his wife followed shortly after. He hugged me, no longer stiff, no longer hiding behind curated words. Amanda came next. She wasn't wearing anything flashy. No designer heels, no forced smile. Just jeans, a sweater, and her kids tugging at her hands. Tom wasn't with her. She didn't explain. And I didn't ask. But when she handed me her coat, our eyes met. Long enough for me to see the truth. She had started to walk her own road now. No maps. No applause. But finally, movement. Gloria and Raymond arrived last. My mother wore a soft beige coat, simple, unguarded. My father carried a bottle of my favorite wine. That alone shocked me more than 1,000 apologies. We greeted each other like grown adults, not with fanfare, not with apologies, but with mutual recognition. For the first time, I felt like the host. Not of a dinner. But of a space where truth didn't have to hide. Dinner began just after sunset. We sat around a long wooden table on the back patio, the ocean in full view, the stars just beginning to show. I didn't sit at the center. I moved from seat to seat, helping the kids with their plates, pouring water, making sure the roasted vegetables reached every hand. No one called me the rebellious daughter. No one whispered about breakdowns, or bad choices, or wasted potential. They saw me for what I was, a woman who had built something whole. Not in spite of their rejection, but because of it. Somewhere during dessert, I noticed Zoe fiddling with her camera again. What are you shooting? I asked, crouching beside her. She grinned and turned the screen toward me. That. I looked. The photo was a wide landscape, shot from a low angle. The entire gathering was in frame, kids laughing on the sand, Gloria crouched to tie Emma's shoelace, Raymond leaning back in his chair, eyes toward the sea. James was pouring wine for his wife. Amanda, holding her youngest, shielding him gently from the breeze. And me, leaning toward Zoe, pointing something out on her viewfinder. No one was looking at the camera. No one was posed. It was real. And the light, God, the light, fell across each face with that golden, imperfect brilliance only nature could deliver. Casting shadows. Leaving highlights. Zoe beamed. I think I found it. You did, I said softly. We printed that photo the next day. I framed it and hung it in the villa's living room, just above the fireplace. No title. No caption. Just a moment captured in truth. That night, after everyone had either gone home or gone to bed, I stepped onto the beach alone. The waves rolled gently across the shore, moonlight dancing on the surface like scattered glass. I looked back at the house. Warm lights spilled from the windows. The laughter had faded, but the echo remained. And in that silence, I didn't feel forgotten. I felt full. I remembered something Gloria once said when I was a child, brushing my hair too tightly before a fundraiser: appearances are everything. She was wrong. Presence is everything. Because when you live fully, when you stop trying to force your way into frames that don't fit, you create your own. And sometimes, if you're lucky, the people who once refused to see you return, not to reclaim you, but to learn from you. The next morning, Gloria approached me while I was wrapping leftovers into small containers for guests to take home. "I spoke to your father last night," she said carefully. "He told me about the quote you left in that frame." I paused. "Did he like it?" She smiled. "He asked me to write one for mine." I looked at her. She wasn't the same woman who once cut me from her guest list, or turned her head when I said the word artist like it was profanity. She was softer now. Not weak, just less rigid. Like someone had finally released her from a mold. "I'm not good with words," she admitted. "But I found an old picture. I was hoping you could help me frame it." I opened the envelope she handed me. It was us. All 5 of us. Me, James, Amanda, Raymond, and Gloria. Standing outside our old home. I was holding a toy camera. My real camera. Beaming. Before any of the hurt had calcified into silence. "We never hung this one," she said. "No," I whispered. "We didn't." She smiled. "Maybe it's time." I nodded. "Yeah. Maybe it is." A few weeks after Thanksgiving, the villa returned to its familiar quiet. No more echoes of family chatter or little feet darting across the hallways. No more lingering perfume in the guest rooms or the low hum of forced politeness. Just the wind through the curtains, the ocean breathing in and out, and the soft sound of my camera shutter as I worked through winter's light. But something had changed inside me. Not a dramatic transformation. Not forgiveness with violins playing in the background. Just a subtle settling. A kind of peace I hadn't felt in over a decade. Not because everyone had made amends, but because I had made something lasting. Without them. Despite them. And, eventually, beyond them. Then, the email came. Subject line: Carter Group Final Campaign Approval, press release attached. I opened it with steady hands. Inside was a beautifully formatted PDF. It featured my work, full-page spreads of Raymond and Gloria, boardroom shots of the team, quiet behind-the-scenes moments. All credited to Yolanda Carter, principal photographer, Coastal Vision Studio. But what stopped me was the final page. The legacy portrait. The one taken on the rooftop garden. At the bottom, in understated gold font, was the campaign's title. The frame we almost missed. I sat back in my chair, staring at the screen for a long time. The title hadn't been mine. It had been added by Raymond, according to the email footnotes. I wasn't sure if that made it better or worse. But it didn't matter. Because it was true. They almost missed me. But I had never missed myself. That weekend, Zoe came to visit again. We walked the beach like we'd done after Thanksgiving. She had a new lens this time, a birthday gift from James, who now asked me for photography tips when he thought no one was looking. Zoe stopped suddenly and pointed out toward the water. "Do you ever think about what your life would have been like if they hadn't pushed you out?" I considered the question. "I used to," I said. "But now I think, maybe they didn't push me out. Maybe they cleared the space I needed to grow." She grinned. "That's poetic." "Sometimes the truth is," I replied. We took more pictures. Shadows on driftwood. Gull prints in the sand. Light catching the edges of a shell just right. And before she left, I handed her a small, gift-wrapped box. Inside was a signed print of her golden hour photo, the one with all of us, caught in that fleeting, honest light. This is the first photo someone else took of me, I told her, where I didn't feel erased or exaggerated. Just real. Her eyes widened. You're framing it? I already did, I said, pointing to the spot above the studio fireplace where it now lived. Later that evening, alone in the studio, I took out the photo Gloria had given me, the one from our childhood, all 5 of us. I held it for a long time, deciding. Then I brought it to the living room, opened the last empty white frame, and placed it inside. Not because they earned the right to be back on my wall, but because I had earned the right to tell the whole story. All of it. The betrayal. The silence. The fight. The return. And the rise. I sat on the sofa and stared at it for a while. Me, holding that little plastic camera at age 7, beaming like the world had just opened. I whispered, "You were right to trust your eye, kid." The next day, I received a handwritten letter. It was from Raymond. Inside were only 2 lines. I finally understand why you never needed our approval. You were always developing your own image. I folded the note and placed it next to my grandmother's letter, 2 ends of the same thread. The final weekend of the year, I hosted one last gathering. Not a party. Just a quiet evening. My team. A few friends. Amanda and her kids. James and his family. Gloria. Even Raymond. Each person brought something, not food, but a photo. One image that meant something to them from that year. We arranged them on a large corkboard near the fireplace. At the end of the night, we stepped back and looked. It was chaotic. Unfiltered. Beautiful. Not posed. Not perfect. Just us. Zoe handed me the last print. A picture she took that night, me standing in the middle of it all, sleeves rolled up, laughing at something off camera, unguarded. "Thought you'd want one where you're not hiding behind the lens," she said. I nodded, voice caught in my throat. We pinned it to the board. Center. Framed by light. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like the daughter who had been erased. I felt like the woman who built the frame. And this time? No one could take me out of it. Yolanda's journey is proof that silence doesn't mean defeat, and rejection doesn't mean the end. She didn't fight to be let back in. She created something greater. And when her family returned, they found her not waiting, but already home. Sometimes, we don't need to reclaim the past, we just need to define our present. On our terms. You may erase someone from a photo, but never from their purpose. What would you have done in Yolanda's place? Have you ever been pushed out only to come back stronger? Tell us your story in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more powerful real-life echoes right here on Revenge Echoes.